Welcome to the Hidden Why podcast, episode 987, my interview with Joy Scott. And we're discussing her book, Magenta Nation. I hope you enjoy. Hello, Joy, and welcome to the Hidden Why podcast. Great to have you here today.
Thanks. It's really great to be here, and I love listening to your accent. Australia is one of my favorite places.
Oh, there you go. Now, look, you've got a new book out, Magenta Nation, which is an interesting title for a book, actually. How did you come up with that?
Well, I'm in the U.S., and here we talk about politics in terms of red and blue. So the idea is if you mix those two colors together, you come up with purple, but magenta sounded a whole lot better.
Purple Nation, Magenta Nation.
Yeah. So we have, it's the idea of coming together and bringing very polarized viewpoints together into some common goals, common language, common directions.
So what sparked your interest in writing such a book? Are you politically minded?
Yes, but more so now than I have been at any time since my youth. Right. And I think it's where we're coming around. You know, we've lived through some very volatile political times. Yeah. Felt like, hey, we got a lot accomplished here. And moving forward, you realize, well, we're not quite there yet. And then something happens and you realize, oh, my goodness, we have so far to go. We've got to get to work. So I think like many people in the U.S. anyway, had a real awakening in 2016 and the things that happened over the last 4 years, showing us that things maybe weren't all we thought. And that we just had a lot of work to do. And that has to start with talking, and it has to start with truth, and it has to start with defining our values and probably taking a new look at how we get there. The founding fathers, they never envisioned social media. They had no idea, of course, of the reality we'd be living in today. And so some things I think we need to be rethinking.
Yeah, for sure. Your background is in public relations, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And that's much about communication, which is probably aligned with the work here in the book, I assume, is it?
Yes, absolutely. And a couple of theorists that I brought in, one is George Lazar, who wrote the book Don't Think of an Elephant. And it has to do with how to communicate about controversial subjects and really finding language that doesn't push buttons and understanding, too, how people perceive information differently. Like some folks have different parts of their brains a little bit larger than others, and they tend to be a little more fearful and concerned and security-minded, where others who don't have that are less fearful, less security-minded, more adventurous, if you would. And you can see that kind of breaking down often along political lines of groups that are really concerned about losing power, about losing privileges, about losing security, about losing a way of life. And they get mobilized by people who can, if you want to, activate that fear. And then you have others that are trying to say, hey, we can deal with this. Let's talk about this. Let's figure out what we need to do. But as long as the emotions are high and the beliefs maybe aren't driven by reality, we're stymied. We're not getting done. We're not moving forward. So looking at the communication goes from there into looking at values and looking at really how we perceive and how we process information, which as a communicator, of course, is fascinating to me.
Do you think you can do that, like bring people together for an understanding? Because it seems like we're getting further and further apart with our segmentations and all that sort of thing.
It is, I think, one of the hardest problems I've ever tried to think about or address. Because people are so isolated in their own little worlds, their own groups, and so vehement about what they believe. I just saw there's a show called The Atlantic Crossing, which is about Roosevelt and Princess Martha of Norway and their friendship during World War II. And it shows the depth of how Americans at that point were isolationist. And as a nation, we still are in many, many ways. And it was only the attack on Pearl Harbor that brought people together. Sometimes it takes a real attack or a life-threatening situation to bring people together, having a strong common enemy. I hope that it doesn't come to that. I'm really hoping that if we work on this individually and it can, as well as on a bigger global level, that we can bring us. We don't have to have a crisis of that magnitude. So I am hopeful, but it's going to take, I think, work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems like it's always been us versus them. There's always us versus them. And nowadays, I feel like it's us versus them, but we don't even know who we are.
Mm-hmm. But, we've seen so much in even during the pandemic. I hate to say there were positive things about it because it was such a tragedy for so many people. But that did, in a way, bring us together. That did touch us in a compassionate way, opening up our hearts. And that did, some of the events that happened, especially, again, I go back to the United States, but the issues around race and discrimination and brutality towards certain races. And we had protests all year long, and there were protests all over the world. And I think that has shifted our consciousness. It's very hard to imagine going backwards from that.
Yeah.
And the other thing we have going for us is young people who are so smart and so woke, and they're looking at this and going, what are you people thinking that you would allow, certain things to happen? As they get more active, I think in this day and time, every single person needs to be an activist. I, like so many people, focused on earning a living and raising a family for a few decades. And it's like, okay, that other stuff can take care of itself. I don't have time for it. But we all need to make time for it in this day and age. And I have such confidence in young adults coming up in their intelligence and their sensitivity and their insight that if they just don't give up, and become active participants, that we're going to see some real change. Yeah.
Where do we start with all this? Do we start with the individual?
Yes. And there's a part in the book that talks about how not only our actions, but our thoughts play a part in changing our reality. There has been a lot of scientific research demonstrating that what they say consciousness is non-local, which means it doesn't just reside in our brains. Okay. It's present throughout the universe. We're vibrational entities. We're sending out vibrations. We can change those. For example, thinking and emotions can change the construction of water, how water crystals come together, how plants and seeds respond, even experiments with prayer to areas of conflict in the world and then as a result, that conflict decreases. We're only beginning to understand this, but we know it has an impact. So if we are visioning the kind of world that we want, and doing that with confidence and gratitude that it is already manifesting, we are putting into action forces. We may not completely understand them, but we know they're there, and we need to harness them for good. And having a stillness practice every day. There's also been some research showing that is really necessary to good health, just like eating a healthy diet, getting your sleep, doing your exercise. We need to chill out. And mindfulness is very popular right now, which is one way to do that. But also meditation and spiritual contemplation of using that to tune in to a higher power, if that's how we see that universe. And the visioning and the meditation are just so powerful in changing the world and changing ourselves. And as we do that, we become compassionate, more compassionate. There's also been some research showing that compassion is an evolutionary advantage. That is that societies that can experience and express that do better than those that do not, that have no empathy or little empathy. And now more than ever, we need an evolutionary advantage.
Absolutely. So what does your practice look like as far as meditation and having that silence?
Yeah, well, that's another blessing for me of the pandemic, because I've struggled for years to get into a regular practice. And suddenly I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't traveling for business, and I had a routine. So initially I was doing it before I went to bed or as I went to bed. But the lure of the sleep was pretty strong. So I started doing it in the morning, and I get up, I get ready, I come out here, I sit down, I turn on my music, and I have some prayers and affirmations that I say. But it is also just the stillness and the tuning in, and allowing the higher power to be present with me. And I say every day, I have everything within me to do what I may need to do today, which is a great confidence builder. And also I do the visioning of seeing this is, I see us coming together. I see the dissonance gone. I see the polarity gone, and give thanks that this is happening now, and that we are coming together now. Not that I want it to happen in the future, but it's now. And I think putting energy into that is, and putting that thought and that spiritual energy behind it is creative. If so many people did that, even a small group, what a huge transformation we would be seeing. And if a large group does it, it's unstoppable.
Yeah, I think for the individual's life generally, like having some sort of meditation, mindfulness practice, affirmations and visualizations would be good. Do you do that for a period of time? Like, you sit there on your floor, or what does it look like?
I'm sitting in a chair, and I have my little affirmation cards right there so I can read them. I have my music going. And sometimes it's very short. We're really busy today. It's hard to sit. When I'm with a group, and I belong to a couple groups that do this, we go 20 minutes. But myself, it's maybe 5 or 10.
Yeah.
Depending on how early I've been able to rouse myself out of bed, and how many appointments I have and what time that day. But even the 5 minutes, it just makes such a difference.
Do you just have like a focus on breath, like a mindfulness sort of practice, or is it transcendental meditation?
Well, I use a procedure. I've been reading about Edgar Cayce for all my life. I don't know if you're familiar with that name. He was a very well-known psychic. He passed away in 1945. He was a mystic. And most of his readings dealt with health. People came to him when they had illnesses that nobody could figure out. And he was incredibly accurate. And his readings have been used by medical practitioners. I worked at such a facility in my 20s. And he really had the concept of holistic medicine. He was the first to say that he said, spirit is the life force, mind is the builder, and the physical is the result. So he really took a very holistic approach. But it also was about spirituality and how to become a spiritual person, and guidance about for small groups who wanted to work together to study. People said, how can I be more psychic? How can I be like you? And his reading said, first become spiritual, and then the intuition will follow. So in the meditation process, it starts out with the head and neck exercises, which people are familiar with. They're very common in yoga practice.
Yeah.
And then some breathing, in and out breathing through the nostrils. Then a prayer of protection, the Lord's Prayer, and then an affirmation, a little saying, "Here I am, Lord, send me and use me," or, you can pick whatever you want. And then the meditation time. And then, and some people like music with that. I love music. It helps me really focus. I also have a little gong,
Oh, nice.
I guess we would call it, that is a beautiful chime. And then coming out of the meditation is sending that energy as prayer to those who need it and doing that visioning. And then ending with the 23rd Psalm. So
you do that visioning about bringing people together and seeing it come together. Is that right?
That's right.
I mean, I don't know. Is that something that you think everyone will want to be doing? Like, it's obviously something that you're very passionate about, but
yes,
and maybe other people. Obviously, I don't think anyone wants to be so segmented and us against them, but they probably don't think about it either in that sense, and maybe therefore won't want to be sitting there visualizing that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it may be that we are taking the right steps to reverse climate change. It may be that we are doing what we need to do to create a healthy earth.
Yeah.
It may be sending peaceful thoughts to areas in the world that are having conflict. It could really be anything that you choose. And I've done an exercise with groups of setting the ideal for the world. Excuse me. This is also from the Casey material, but setting a spiritual ideal for yourself. What is it that you want to manifest in the world? Is it love? Is it faith? Is it justice? Is it compassion? And then if you believe that, then what kind of attitudes do you have that express it? And what kind of actions do you take?
Yeah.
And I do a workshop that starts with doing that for the world. If we had an ideal world, what would the spiritual quality be that was manifested everywhere? What would be the attitudes that people everywhere would have? And what would people be doing? How would they live? So that we have a vision, and it may be different for every single individual. We have a vision of the ideal world that we want to have and the ideal life that we want to have. And that is what goes into that person's visioneering exercise. It's their vision.
Yeah. Do you think, again, about that higher frequency you talk about, by doing that and having that sort of frequency within that sort of vibrates out there and just helps other people catch on to that? Is that how it works?
Yes, it does. And there are people meditating, all over everywhere. More and more people are doing that. I read somewhere it's like 20% of people have some kind of practice like that now. And it's growing all the time. And the mindfulness movement has been very instrumental in that, to introduce the idea of stopping, focusing, listening to your inner self. It's very Buddhist in a way.
Yeah.
So that is definitely growing, and I expect it will continue to do so.
So beyond a mindfulness practice individually, what else can the individual do to help this coming together of ideas and to stop this segmentation and this tribalism? Mm-hmm.
First of all, figure out what's going on. I mean, it's very easy to just ignore it all to a degree.
Yeah.
But as I say, everybody needs to be somewhat of an activist and be educated. I do a podcast called Magenta Nation that takes controversial issues and just kind of lays out information about them. So people can listen to that and say, okay, based on this information, this is what I think and this is what I want. So that they can begin to have informed opinions. being open to perspectives other than yourself and other than yours. Mm-hmm. And when people differ, and this is maybe one of the hardest things to do, is listen. We tend to react emotionally and judgmentally. It's like, why do you think that? How could that possibly be? Don't you know? And just to listen and do what I call a 5 whys exercise. Oh, that's interesting. What makes you think that? And then the person says, well, okay, tell me more about that. What makes you think that? And just kind of keep going. And you get to the core value that person has that's behind that. And it may be, again, fear or a concern. And if you say you get to that and it's, well, what if we could deal with that maybe by doing this or doing that, and just proposing some other ideas again, using the non-threatening or non-button pushing language, just to open up to different ideas. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll tell you an example. I had a family member that I actually went on a trip with, and we've known each other obviously all our lives, and a wonderful person, but very, very different views to me than I have on politics and the way the world should be run. Yep. And I didn't even realize that. And as we started talking, I found myself reacting to a couple of things. It's like, what? No, yeah. And now I think back on it and I go, that was the totally wrong way to interact. I wish that I had been more patient and just listened. And I think we could have come together we didn't fight or argue, but we just stopped talking. And I think it would have been a wonderful opportunity to maybe begin to move closer on some of the things that we both hold dear.
What do you think is the cause for us creating this such competitive differences that we have right now?
Well, on the macro level, and this is my personal opinion, I think we are involved in a huge shift in our society here, where we've had a world order where basically rich white men were at the top of the heap, so to speak. And all of these other groups are rising. And so it's just creating a lot of conflict. Of not wanting to recognize that, not even seeing that it's happening, seeing that people feeling they're losing privilege and not liking that. And so it's an opportunity for leaders and demagogues, to come in and whip that up into a frenzy and gain power and more wealth. So my personal opinion is that's the root of it. And that as we change and become a more compassionate people, we're going to come out with a much better society. But right now, it's hard to see that because, again, we're still kind of run to a degree, based on power rather than cooperation. So it's a huge change in the world order that we're experiencing right now.
Why do you see that? Why do you see that shift? I mean, obviously there's that conflict, and if there's that conflict, how can we become more compassionate people if we're so involved in that us versus them conflict?
Well, first of all, as we were talking about, it starts with the individual and groups of people. A great book that I love is The 8 Laws of Social Change by Stephen Schwartz. And he has studied all these social movements and found that they are usually started by a tiny little group of people, like the Quakers, who started the abolitionist movement and the rights to vote for women. They were a tiny little group, but it only takes 10% of a culture or a society to change the whole culture. You reach a tipping point. 10% is not that much. I think we are well on our way there. And I don't see a lot of the people who have been woke, quote unquote, over the last couple of years ever going back to being asleep again.
Yeah.
So we have a trajectory going on, and we need to keep it going. And that's how these changes are going to become permanent.
So you think there'll be a balance of power, or power will just go all together and will just be a cooperative?
I do believe that if we're going to survive as a species, that's where we need to go. Yeah, because when you look at our world today, I mean, there was colonialism, there's nationalism, and what's behind that all of that is power and wealth and the desire to get as much as possible for yourself. And as we change and become a more compassionate and cooperative people, race, species, if you would, we will want to do things differently. Now, I don't see this happening in spite of my visioneering tomorrow, although I'd be thrilled if it did. But we all have our part to do, and it starts with being clear and setting in motion those powers that influence our environment, and then taking action. Going back to the book, it talks about the quotidian choices. Everything that you do should be in line with your values. If you want a sustainable planet, every single decision you make needs to be guided by that goal.
Yeah.
And if we start doing that and also sharing our own choices, we get other people involved. And again, it's all at sort of the grassroots level. And that's how, political movements are started and become successful, and social change happens. It's at that basis. It's a group of people who start like a snowball, and it gets bigger and bigger.
So with your book, what is one message we can leave people with today that you'd like them to take away from our conversation, but also your book?
Sure. It's that we can change the world, and we need to do it now. And we need to take personal responsibility for determining what we want and then making that a reality. It's really not an option to kind of just be asleep and drift along. If we do that, it's almost as if we're doing something negative. I mean, we all need to take action. And it's in our hands.
Wake up.
Yes.
Love it. Joy, I'm going to stick the links in the show notes for your book. So it is available on Amazon.
Yes,
Magenta
it is.
Nation. Now, you've got a website there, magentanation.com.
Yes, it's magenta-nation.com.
Magenta-nation.com. And
Yes.
Anywhere else people can reach you, or are they the best places at the moment?
That's the best place at the moment, yes.
Oh,
And the
fantastic.
website has the book, the podcast, the blog, some other books along the theme of forgiveness, and some remote events.
What's going on in your life? Thank you, Joy. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Guys listening, episode 987 at thehiddenwhy.com. Until next time, peace, passion, and purpose. See you soon. Thanks, guys, for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. I hope you love what you're hearing. If you like this episode, guys, or any of the episodes that you're listening to here at The Hidden Why, please do me a favor by sharing it. You can share it with your families. You can share it with your loved ones. You can do that by using your favorite social media channels, using the icons on the platform that you're listening to The Hidden Why podcast. Also, guys, if you're a fan of the show, please connect with me. Connect with me at thehiddenwhy.com. I love to hear from you. I love to converse with the people that listen to this show to find out what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, and perhaps if they have any questions or feedback for the show as well. You can stay up to date with all that I'm releasing here, guys. I do a solo show every Monday, a 3-minute thought every Thursday. I do 2 interviews a week on Wednesday and a Saturday, and a book review every Friday. You can stay up to date with all that by subscribing to my newsletter at thehiddenwhy.com. Just enter your email address there, and also subscribing to the podcast on the platform that you choose to listen to your podcasts. You can also support the show, guys, by using the Amazon links at thehiddenwhy.com. So if you like books, you can get all the books that I review there, and anything else really that you like to purchase through Amazon. So use that link, it helps support the show. And we've also got a deal with Audible, guys. Audible is a fantastic way to listen to all your favorite books. We've got a deal with them so you can get 2 free books when you subscribe subscribe to a 30-day free trial. So check that out again at thehiddenwhy.com. Guys, that's it from me. You know what to do. Go out there, breathe more passion into every single moment. Do everything with greater purpose. And in doing so, you will discover your hidden why. This is The Hidden Why. My name is Lee Martinuzzi. Until next time, peace, passion, and purpose. See you soon.